Notre Dame fans, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am Vince Siderio. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is that guy right there. That's Brian Driscoll. He's the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And it is Tuesday, and it is a game week. So what are we going to talk about today, Brian? It's stacking up.
Some matchups.
That's right. We're going to talk the Notre Dame offense versus the North Carolina Tar Heel defense. We're going to look at the numbers. We're going to break it down, and we're going to talk about what lies in with this matchup. But before we do, we kind of want to talk about the fact that why this is a big matchup, and we'll go over some more of that, obviously, on Thursday, like we always do. But I know, Brian, you wanted to talk a little bit about the matchup.
Well, yeah, I mean, just big picture, this is the team, since this is kind of our first time talking about North Carolina, this is one of two teams that concerns me the most. And this matchup is not the one that people are probably going to focus on the most. It's going to be more about the Notre Dame defense against the North Carolina offense. That's the good on good matchup. But honestly, in my opinion, in games like this, it's as much about the not good versus not good matchup that's going to have the biggest impact. And what I mean by that is, against North Carolina, the Notre Dame defense could play well-ish and give up 27, 30 points, if not more. If the offense doesn't play well, it could even be more, as we saw against Cincinnati, where the offense basically gave Cincinnati 10 points.
Right.
So it's going to come down to the Notre Dame offense has to be able to match up and play very well in this game. And I think last year was sort of an example of that. The first two drives, the Notre Dame defense just was having trouble finding its way against that tempo North Carolina offense, and they go up, score 2 times on their first 2 drives, score 14 points, and Notre Dame offense matched North Carolina point for point. Notre Dame punts on their first series, and then their second series, they scored, and then the series after that, they score, and they were able to stay with it until the Notre Dame defense was able to get caught up and start playing to their potential. And then Notre Dame kind of pulled away. But at the same time, they required the defense to kind of play a bit of a Herculean effort in, holding them to 17 points. In a lot of games, what the offense did last year wasn't going to be good enough to beat a team like North Carolina. And you can't just repeat that right now, especially since you won't have Kyle Hamilton now. The counter to that is, well, Kyle Hamilton left the last game. Yeah, in the second quarter, and North Carolina didn't have a whole entire week to prepare for not having Kyle Hamilton. So it's imperative that the Notre Dame offense does 2 things. Fast start and finish strong. And we'll get into that when we kind of get into the keys to the game, because that unit's going to have to be able to score against what has been a pretty disappointing North Carolina defense. I mean, honestly, really, I never thought it was that good. I've always felt Jay Bateman was an overrated defensive coordinator. I remember people were pushing for him when Clark Lee left, when Mike Elko left, and when Clark.
I remember the look on your face when people would bring up his name, and it just cracked me up. It was.
I don't know where that came from. Really, I don't know what reporters jumped on the Jay Bateman bandwagon and why.
Do you think it's just because of the hype surrounding North Carolina in general? And they're like, well, he must be good then.
But they've never been good on defense.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the last 2 years, they've given up 29.4, and last year and this year, they're giving up 28.9. And if you look at the recruiting rankings, so obviously we have a breakdown at irishbreakdown.com of, we take the starting lineups and the key depth players, and you look at North Carolina's defense, they've got a 5-star both of their cornerbacks were former top 100 recruits, including Tony Grimes, who was a 5-star recruit, very talented player. Notre Dame tried to recruit him. Kyler McMichael transfer from Clemson, top 100 player. Another safety, Cameron Kelly, another player that Notre Dame recruited for a little bit from the Chesapeake, Virginia area, 4-star player, number 218 player in the country. Miles Murphy, who's a sophomore D tackle, same name as the kid at Clemson, but he wasn't that quite ranked that high, but he was a top 150 player. So there's some talented kids on this roster, and yet they play bad defense. Having said that, Notre Dame's got to be able to take advantage more so than what they did last week against USC, meaning you move the ball the way you did, but you can't turn the ball over. You can't leave points on the field, those kind of things. So That's what's going to make this matchup really intriguing, because this is actually an athletic North Carolina defense. It's just not a really well coached or well schemed North Carolina defense, and Notre Dame has to take advantage.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with you. And based on what Notre Dame did Saturday night, and if they build on that, I feel like they can take advantage of it. And
building on it is the key, not repeating, but building.
Absolutely. But building on it and keeping the same philosophy and the same, tempo and everything that we saw on Saturday that we liked, but cleaning up some of the mistakes and, and that kind of thing. But if they can build on that, this matchup is one that obviously favors Notre Dame. And it's going to be one where I think moving forward, so the first half of the season, in my opinion, the defense bailed the offense out on numerous occasions. I mean, they were the
first half of this season, all of last season, all of the season before.
Right. No, you're absolutely correct. Okay. But I feel like the second half of the season, if they can build on what they did on Saturday, I feel like the offense is going to have an opportunity to help out the defense for the first time in a long time.
Right.
Because the defense is going to get strained against some of these teams. I'm not saying that they can't win those matchups, but I'm saying it's going to be tougher than it was.
You can't just keep putting your like I was chatting with I was having a chat last night with Mike Hutton, our beat writer. We were talking a little bit last night, and the comment I made to him, we were talking about has the Notre Dame defense been disappointing, and the comment I made to him is, what other team in the country, what other top 10 to 15 team or top 10 to 15 defense has literally been in a fourth quarter game every single week?
Right.
Where you're either playing from behind or basically playing even almost the entire game. And, you could look at the Florida State game and say, hey, look, the defense, that was the one game the offense did give you a big lead and you kind of blew it. But that was game one. But, I mean, you go to Toledo, you go to Purdue is really the only one you could say maybe wasn't a fourth quarter game,
Sure.
But Notre Dame pulled away in the fourth quarter. It wasn't like they were up big. It was like 10-3 at halftime. I mean, every game Notre Dame has played so far has been kind of a battle.
Right.
And Notre Dame hasn't been able to play with a big lead a whole lot. And they haven't been able to put a team away. Now, they had a little bit of a chance on that on Saturday, but then both sides of the ball did things to allow USC to get back in. But it was a step in the right direction. Now it's about taking it to that next level.
Right.
And I think that's going to be the key when I look at this matchup is the Notre Dame offense has to take advantage of what North Carolina does on defense.
Yeah.
And be balanced and take advantage of the big plays. And if they can put North Carolina away early or put North Carolina in catch-up mode, the difference between North Carolina and USC is if you get a big lead on USC and USC can't run the ball anymore, it doesn't matter. That's what they do anyway. North Carolina, if you make them one-dimensional, you're gonna be able to make more plays
because they
require balance more.
Yes, right. That is correct. I completely agree with that. And just talking about the Notre Dame offense, I feel like in Saturday's game was the first time that the offense kind of put the team on their shoulders when USC came back and they were within that one score. And again, I wasn't necessarily worried that the game was in the balance, but it was a one-score game. The ball goes back to Notre Dame's offense. They go down and score a touchdown. It was a long, sustained drive. They score a touchdown. It's the first time I really felt like, okay, the offense is saying, hey, guys, we got this. We're going to go on a drive. We're going to put this game away. Like that. It's the first time I really felt that way all season. And I'm hoping that they can build on that moving forward.
I'd say second time for me, just from I think that the Wisconsin game, when the defense gave them a short field, I thought that Notre Dame's offense did a good job of putting points on the board and putting that game away before the defense. But to your point, on a bigger scale against a better offense, or a better team, I would say, or a more dangerous team, I would say so.
Yeah.
But before we dive in, Vince, to the run game matchup, I just wanted to pull up Mark Krismanich's super chat. It says, Brian, what scheme changes make most sense since Hamilton will be out against North Carolina's deep receiving core? Mark, we'll talk about that tomorrow, I promise you. I don't think it's so much a scheme change as just you're just not going to have that Swiss Army knife of Kyle Hamilton. I don't think it necessarily changes the scheme a ton. I think maybe being a bit more aggressive might actually benefit you a little bit more, but we'll get into why I think that is tomorrow when we break down the matchup between the Notre Dame defense against the North Carolina offense, because that's the sexy matchup, right, Vince? I mean, that's the one that people want to talk about the most and all that. But I think this one is really important. And when I look at North Carolina and I think about what
somebody put in the chat that I have information on the board behind me. That was for PSATs. It was information they had to put. It's nothing. It's going to do anything for anybody. So.
So anyway,
sorry, I was like, "What is on the board back there?" Anyway, sorry about that.
Yes, no worries, no worries. So let's dive into Vince. Let's dive into this matchup. And
yes,
as we always do, we're going to start with the matchup of the Notre Dame rushing offense against the North Carolina rush defense. This is a bad on bad matchup. Notre Dame is trending in the right direction, and it is kind of funny. I had a conversation, or I had a couple people, tell me that there's a group of fans that are sort of the, everything is awesome, don't criticize anyone crowd that said, like the last two games that, where's all the Jeff Quinn haters now? And my response was, I don't think 170 yards against USC's terrible defense at 4.15 yards per carry, and that being the rally cry, is making the point you think it's making. Especially considering the last two times you played at home against USC, Notre Dame ran for over 300 yards both times.
Yeah.
So, but here is the positive: they are going in the right direction.
They are. This number, that yards per game number, was in the double digits the last time we had one of these charts up. I believe it was like 98 point something.
It was in single digits. Yeah, double digits. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So now it's in triple digits. So they are trending in the right direction, no question. But 107.7 yards a game is terrible. I'm sorry.
Right, but it's 175 the last two games. And the reason I want to focus on that number two, why that's a good number, is because it's when they've really made the change on the offensive line and the left side. They basically went with Joe Alt at left tackle early again. I mean, they started Joe Alt against Virginia Tech, and then went to Andrew Christopher early. Yeah. And, still only 4.2 yards a carry, which isn't great. They only gave up one sack against USC, so you can't really say the sacks kept the numbers down. But it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Right.
175 yards a game the last 2 weeks. 4.2 yards a carry is, you'd say, okay, is not great, but in the first 5 games, they were 1.9, 3.4, 3.5, 0.1 against Wisconsin. That was 3 yards on 32 carries, and then 3.0.
Right.
So again, it's a jump. And the reason it's important is I don't think Notre Dame has to dominate North Carolina with its ground game. The key for this game is going to be just like it was against USC and just like it was against Virginia Tech. Limit the negative plays and just be a good complement to your pass game. And I feel more this is the most confident I felt about Notre Dame's run game going into a matchup really since we first started to see what this Notre Dame defense was or offensive line was going to look like once we realized how bad it was.
Right.
This is the most confident I've been about this matchup all season, because at least the last 2 games, Vince, they're starting to find a level of consistent execution that's allowing the backs to do what they do. And I don't think North Carolina has the horses to stop them from doing that in this game.
Well, and you talk about doing what they do. I mean, look, Kyron Williams, we can all agree that he is a really, really good back. And on the low end, half of his yards were all on his own. And that's on the low end, right? That's the conservative end when I say half, right? If you give him any kind of a crease, which they started to do the last 2 games, right? This is when you see him start to take off, because he is that good. And you don't have to give him wide open lanes. That's not necessary. Right. You just have to give him a little bit of something, because I think he's also gotten better at being a little bit more patient, because that was kind of our rub on him, was that he tries to get to the hole a little bit too quickly.
Which early in the season I understood. Yeah. You understand why he was making that mistake.
Yes, absolutely.
His patience the last 2 games, Vince,
has been excellent. It's been excellent. I mean, he's been able to find holes that were not there when he got the football in his hands.
And this is a bit of a change of subject, kind of, but it's about what you were referring to. this is exactly why what's happening to him this year is actually not hurting his NFL draft stock. It is
Correct.
actually helping it
Mm-hmm.
because teams are watching his film and saying that guy is getting very little help, and look what he's doing.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing for me is when I watch Kyron Williams play, he's been able to just find creases. Now, the reason the effectiveness of the run game is, and we talked about this early in the season, we talked about, against Toledo and against Purdue, whenever they give him any kind of crease, he's turning them into like 40-yard touchdowns, right? Well, we're seeing a little bit more consistency in that regards the last couple games where Kyron's been able to kind of hit it and hit it and hit it. And it hasn't been the big gains. It hasn't been the 40-yard gains and the 50-yard gains. It's been more of an efficient, because what you have to be careful of is, I think I'm trying to look at Kyron's numbers last week. I think he had like 138 yards rushing, Vince, something like that.
It was 138. Yep.
138 at 5.5 yards per carry. It's a good number. But when you look at it, though, he didn't have that really long. I think his longest run was like, 38 yards? Right.
He didn't have a big, long to kind of skew the numbers.
So
now, there were a couple where he was close to breaking them, but he didn't.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
The point being that if you take away his top carry, it's 100 yards on 24 carries. That's not blow you away numbers. But what I liked about the performance, and I'm going to give the offensive line credit for this as well as Kyron, who played phenomenal football, is they were able to efficiently attack USC in the first half. You didn't have the -2s, the +1s on first down. They used the pass game on first down so effectively in the first half that it got them in positions where you're 2nd and 2, you're 3rd and 2, where, hey, we can run it, we can throw it, we can do whatever we want. You couldn't just key the run. And I think that's something that helped Kyron be effective too. They went more towards running on first down in the second half, and you started to see them getting more 3rd and long situations, which is obviously something that they need to be mindful of. That's what good self-scouting should show you right after the game. Look, reality is when we can effectively throw on first down, we're a better offense. It doesn't mean you only throw on first down. You can never become that. That helps. And this is what we get to is reverse engineering the pass game, the offense, to where the pass game becomes a focal point. And as they've done that, it's made Kyron so much better. So I think these numbers right here that we're looking at here with Notre Dame, I think are a bit misleading. I think right now I expect Notre Dame to be better than that in this matchup. How much better is going to be the key, because this is not a good North Carolina run defense. And I think these numbers over here are a little bit misleading as well, because North Carolina had one game against Virginia that was an anomaly. They gave up 24 yards on 22 carries. In their other 6 games, they've given up 127 yards, 172 yards, 261 yards, 130 yards to a bad Duke offense, 228 yards, and then 157 yards to Miami this past week. And I believe Miami was playing without both of their top 2 running backs in that game, at least a couple of them. So to me, when I look at that, that's a Miami team that's not exactly a great rushing offense. Miami had 322 yards against Central Connecticut State, 87 against Bama, 175 against App State, 52 against Michigan State, 95 against NC State, and 169 against Virginia, whose defense also stinks.
Right.
So Miami has their 2nd best yards per attempt game of the season against North Carolina. Right. So that's I'm giving that for context, because 157 yards may seem like an okay day, but when that other team doesn't run for 157 yards,
what they normally do. Yeah. Right.
So I think this is a North Carolina defense that can be run on. My fear is the same as last week, because again, we're still learning just who this team is. Are they gonna say, okay, well, we can control the clock? I'm afraid that they're going to get into the mindset they got into last year, which against North Carolina, which is control the clock, keep their offense off the field, because I don't think this team is capable of doing that. Not against this offense, because this offense is more dangerous than the USC offense. We talked about that when we did the USC post game. There's no Drake London on this team, but there's 3 or 4 guys can really hurt you. They run the ball a lot better. They have a more mobile quarterback and a much more effective passing quarterback in Sam Howell. So that makes the offense more dangerous to where you can't just, okay, we got a 7-point lead. Let's milk this thing. You've got to come out trying to score every time you get the football. And so to me, they can run on North Carolina. I just hope they don't get too obsessed with trying to run on North Carolina. But if they can be assignment correct, if they can limit the negatives, then I do think the run game can have a big impact on this game, Vince, whether they run for 175 plus, which is what they've done average the last two games, or if they only run for like 130, 140. It's about efficiency. Make North Carolina defend both parts of your offense. That, to me, is the key in this game.
Yeah, and I don't if they never run 13 personnel again outside the 5-yard line, I'll be happy. And
just
I don't
prepare yourself not to be happy then.
I know, but like going to your point in that, is Notre Dame going to come out and be like, okay, we need to possess the ball, we need to run the ball, we need to do that, and we see 12 and 13, more so the 13. 12 I can get on board with because they're generally not going to have both tight ends attached when they run 12 personnel. Okay. And Alan, I saw your message earlier, by the way. He says I ordered my IB shirt and flag, which is freaking awesome, by the way. He apologized for the betting advice in the second half. He goes, I forgot to take into account that Kelly doesn't like to put his foot on people's throats, and he's right. But anyway, they're not going to be able to be ball control. It's just not the way this offense is going to be good. They're going to get bogged down. Right. And even if Tyler Buchner is the quarterback, that's still not the offense that you want to run. You don't want to be bogged down. That doesn't work, at least with this offense. And so I hope that they continue to do what they were doing on Saturday and kind of abandon the idea that, okay, we need to hold on to the ball longer than North Carolina. Right. That's not the game. That can't be the game plan because that's not who you are. You have to know who you are. And I feel like maybe they do know who they are, but don't remind yourself of last year because that's not who you are this year.
Right. My hope is that based on what we saw this past week with the USC game, that they're not going to get into that mode. And that was my fear last week as well. USC was a team that could score. Notre Dame came out early and went after them. Of course, second half, they tried to go away from that, and it allowed USC to get back in the game.
Right.
That's the biggest lesson they have to take from last week is if you have a 17-3 or a 14 to a 17-point lead at halftime against North Carolina, they can erase that like this.
Absolutely.
And so you have to keep the pedal to the metal in the third quarter if you have a lead. That doesn't mean you can't run the ball. It just means you need to stay balanced. But balance to me is going to be the key. And the other thing about this matchup is this has to stay low. And I think that's something we've seen the offense do a much better job of in recent games is not giving up as many negatives. And that's been huge. It's been huge for this offense. And a big part of it is back to what, and I know some of you are probably going to get sick of me here saying this, and I get it. I feel you, but a big part of that is keeping a body on a body. That's all you have to do. When you have a guy like Kyron Williams, all you have to do is keep a body on a body. You don't have to dominate. You don't have to blow them off the line. You know, in the last two games that they've played, Notre Dame gave up 3 tackles for loss against USC, one of them being a sack. They gave up 2 tackles for loss against Virginia Tech, and both were sacks. So they didn't give up a single run game negative. That to me is the biggest difference as far as just like statistically, the biggest difference in effectiveness, the biggest difference in the last 2 games compared to previous ones. Because not giving up negatives keeps you on schedule.
Right.
It keeps you. Notre Dame was in so many run pass options situations on Saturday against USC. It was phenomenal. What I mean by that is you want to be in as many down and distances as possible where you have the run and the pass at your disposal. Part of the reason they were so good in the first half on third down is because they were in so many third and medium to shorts, which means you can run it on 3rd and 4. You can run the football. I wouldn't recommend it a ton with this team, but it's still an option.
Fair enough.
So I think that's the thing for me. So the advantage in this game the interesting part is the advantage in this game statistically goes to North Carolina overall, the big picture. But if I'm evaluating on what I've seen in the three most recent games,
Yeah.
even with the Cincinnati game being part of that, to me, it's advantage Notre Dame. That's kind of where I am. I think Notre Dame goes into this matchup heading in the right direction, and UNC's defense is not.
I was going to give a caveat. I was going to give my advantage to North Carolina, but with the caveat that Notre Dame's been playing better recently.
Right.
So you definitely, I want to say you stole my thunder, but we're on the same page as far as that is concerned, because if you're into stocks and things, like the arrow is here for Notre Dame's rush attack. I mean, they're going in the right direction.
Right.
North Carolina's been down here, and they're not getting any better. They're not getting any worse. They're just kind of not a good run defense. And Notre Dame has the ability to take advantage. I think they will, but if we're just looking at the numbers, it's advantage North Carolina.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point. If it's a season long, numbers stack up, right? Like I used to write an article like that at BGI. It was like just looking at the numbers.
Yeah,
and numbers refer to total numbers and context of who you've played and all that. If we're just looking at numbers, it's not even close. I mean, as bad as North Carolina is, they're still significantly better statistically than Notre Dame. If we're talking specific matchup on October 30th, who has the advantage? I think Notre Dame has the advantage because they are playing better. I think they finally found some answers. As long as they stick with what we've seen, what we saw late against Virginia Tech and in the USC game in the first half,
right?
I think this team will come out and run the ball effectively against North Carolina. Before we move on to the pass game, Vince, we have a super chat from JP Buellsfeld. He says, Brian and Vince, thank you for everything you do for us in IB Nation. I challenge every single person watching this chat right now to support IB Nation. And JP, that means a lot to us. It means a lot to us. And, everything we do for IB Nation, we do what we do for IB Nation because we love Notre Dame football, but also because we love this community, and the support we got has been tremendous. I'm going to have an announcement coming up here very soon on the message board about what your support on the message board and on the on the podcast and the YouTube channel is going to allow for us to do in 2022. It's very, very exciting. So, but thank you for that, JP. I appreciate that very, very much. So, Vince, pass game time.
Yes, sir.
Here we go. This is going to be an interesting matchup because
it is.
It's Notre Dame's been kind of like two different offenses this year when it comes to the pass game. And I'm curious to see which one shows up again. And I'm hoping that what we saw against USC is just the beginning, because for as happy and excited as I was about the progress they made, it's still not where it needs to be. And what I mean by that is, yes, they were really good, efficient and moving the ball. Number one, they left too many points on the field. And number two, they weren't able to really hit any big plays in the pass game. And they're going to need that against North Carolina. They're going to need that the rest of the year, especially against North Carolina. And so to me, when I look at that part of the matchup, I look at this and say, if we can get a combination of what we saw the first two games with what from a scheme and effectiveness and aggressiveness standpoint, and if we can combine that with what we saw from the last couple games from a pass protection standpoint, and then what we saw late against Virginia Tech and against USC from a get it out quick, spread the field, we've seen everything they need to do in regards to having a really explosive pass game. I think they went away from that partly because of protection, and then that protection led to Jack Cohn not playing very well. But I think Saturday we started to see that, and they took some shots downfield. It wasn't that they didn't try to take shots downfield; they just didn't connect. You had Jack underthrew. I thought underthrew Lorenzo Styles on a play that should have been lead him. He missed Michael Mayer, and then Kevin Austin had two missed plays. So it's not like they didn't take shots, but we need to see that connect more. And I think against a North Carolina team that likes to mix up their coverages a lot, North Carolina in their base defense, Vince, is they list themselves as kind of like a 3-3, kind of how they have a D end, a D tackle, a nose tackle, then 2 outside linebackers and an inside linebacker. But if you really look at it and you really break it down, it's not really a 3-3. It's more of a 4-2-5.
Mm-hmm.
One of their outside linebackers is more of he's more of a defensive end.
Right.
If you really break it down, that's Tamon Fox. He's a 6'3", 265-pound kid. That means he's the same size as Dalen Hayes. And if you watch how he plays, that's how he lines up. It's right. So I say they like when I think 3-3-5, I think what we see when Notre Dame does it, which is you got a nose, you got 2-5 techniques, but what North Carolina normally does is they have more of their D tackles in on a 3 technique or some kind of 2-eye or maybe a 4-eye, which is outside the tackle, but then their outside linebacker is lined up outside in a 2-point stance. 2-point stance meaning he doesn't have his hand in the ground. It's exactly how Notre Dame uses their Viper, their drop end. So it's more of a 4-down front than anything. They will mix up their looks. They'll bring they'll slant, they'll twist, they'll stump, they'll bring linebackers from depth. That's my big concern in this game, Vince.
Yeah, because I don't feel like USC really did that.
No,
they didn't do that, and it allowed Notre Dame to be successful with their offensive line. Right? I mean, they weren't dealing with games a whole lot, line games and stunts and things. And this is going to be a big test for them. I agree with you. As I was watching the film, what stood out to me greatly is how much they do move and stunt and play games up front. And a lot of times that will, teams do that to mask inability to get things done defensively. But North Carolina has some guys. I mean, I don't think they're doing it to mask their deficiencies.
Their talent level isn't as bad as their numbers.
Right, exactly. I don't think that their scheme is to mask their deficiencies. I just think that that's who they are, and they're going to challenge Notre Dame. This is going to be a big test, especially on the left side, because those guys are new, they're young, they haven't really experienced that kind of a thing yet. Because I have no anticipation that the right side is going to be able to handle it. I hate to be the negative guy, but that's just where I'm at. So
did Kane Madden leave a flaming pile of something on your front yard or something like that?
Did you rewatch the film?
I did.
By chance, and your thoughts on that?
He wasn't good.
I haven't talked to you about it.
He wasn't as awful as I think you like. I think at times you've tended to kind of focus on how many mistakes he makes and kind of gloss over the good blocks he has. But the reality is he's a one-trick pony. If he can block down in the A gap, he's going to get great movement. Yes. But you also can't dismiss how effective those blocks were in the game. I think that's where we've missed it. But overall, it was a pretty. I mean, he was graded out as their least effective offensive lineman for me, and it was just the same old. But I'm just kind of giving you a hard time about that.
That's okay. Because look, I need to be called out.
I think Josh Lugg was better than you're giving him credit for in that game too.
Good.
He got beat a couple times, but I think he was better than I think you give him credit for. And I felt the same way in the Virginia Tech game. I thought that he was better than you thought he did. But your point stands, Vince. Whether it's the right side or the left side, North Carolina is not going to do what USC did.
Right.
They're going to say we can't just let Jack Cohn sit back there and get comfortable, because we saw what he did to Florida State. We saw what he did to Toledo when he had time. We saw what he did to Purdue when he had time. We saw what he did to Virginia Tech when he had time. And we saw what he did to USC when he had time. Look, people don't like Jack Cohn. I get that. Some don't. But when the kids had time this year, he shreds people. I mean, that's just the reality. And North Carolina is going to do that. Now, the problem is when I watch Jay Bateman coach, he reminds me too much of a John Tenuta type of guy, in that what he does isn't super sound. And Notre Dame has to be able to take advantage of that. They turn so many guys loose in the pass game. And here's the keys for Notre Dame. Number one, you have to protect. You have to be prepared for twists, for line games, for stunts, for second-level pressures. They're going to bring a corner fire or two in this game. I still don't understand why USC didn't do that. Every team
corner fire has worked every time against Notre Dame.
Has had no answers for that this year. No. Now, maybe Notre Dame would have had an answer for it against USC, right? I'm not.
They didn't even try.
Saying, at least try.
Yeah, I'm with you.
North Carolina is not going to sit back and just let them run free and hope that their secondary guys who are talented can cover. They're not dumb. So you have to protect. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is there's two concerns I have on the perimeter. Number one is, or two comments. One is North Carolina is a very undisciplined secondary when there's any kind of movement or post snap switch of routes. What that essentially is so let's say you have an outside receiver and an inside receiver. At the snap, the post snap switches, the outside receiver does something inside and then does a route, and then the outside guy works outside. We've seen Notre Dame do that a little bit this year. They did it a couple of times against USC. Another one is when they team stack, and Florida State did this for a big play. Florida State motioned their outside guy down, ran a stack alignment, and he just released vertically, and two guys from North Carolina ran with one Florida State guy, and the other guy just ran free for a big play.
And Notre Dame has run that stack before, and they've also done a little bit about what you're talking about out of that 3-man bunch. Mm-hmm. They've done some of that. Right. You know what I mean? So that's in their wheelhouse. Like, they don't have to just draw stuff up in the dirt.
We saw Michael Mayer catch a post wheel on that against Purdue. You know, like I said, we've seen it.
Yeah.
We need to see some of that. Here's my concern, however. My concern is at times Notre Dame has got too horizontal stretch focus. Now, what that means is a horizontal stretch, as we've talked about, is sort of left to right or right to left route. So this guy's doing something vertically, this guy's doing something vertically, this guy's doing something vertically, right? As opposed to a vertical stretch, which is the stretch refers to the manner in which you're stretching the defense and the manner in which the quarterback reads it. A horizontal stretch is left to right, right to left. So inside guy to outside guy. A vertical stretch is more top to bottom, bottom to top. So essentially you have, two guys, one guy runs an in, another guy runs, an under. You have some kind of post snap switch, smash concepts, floods. We've talked about floods on this, where the outside guy runs a go route. One of the inside guys runs like a 12 to 15 yard out. Another guy runs a shallow, where you're kind of stretching them top to bottom. That's a vertical stretch. When you run crosses over the middle and the guy behind it, that's a vertical stretch. You're stretching the defense vertically. Now, the ironic thing that some people have a hard time understanding is concept is not a vertical stretch in the manner in which we're talking. It's actually a horizontal stretch. Yeah. So again, it's about the read and the manner in which you're stretching the defense. The scary thing about this is that because Notre Dame does tend to get a little too, at times, vertically oriented, or horizontal or oriented with kind of the ISO routes, North Carolina has sort of the defense that has given that problems this year. They have a 6'2" and a 6'1" cornerback that are really athletic players. And that is Tony Grimes, who's a former 5-star recruit from Virginia, and Kyler McMichael, who's a 6'2", 200-pound corner from Georgia. We saw against Cincinnati, their big, long corners just ate the Notre Dame outside guys up on these type of routes. Purdue did the same thing. If they just kind of come out and say, hey, let's have Kevin Austin run go routes all game, he's either going to have the best game of his career, or they're going to struggle, because I don't think he's not going to all of a sudden be the most well-coached receiver in the world. Him and Braden Lindsey it's just not going to be the case. So if they're just coming out and running comebacks and go routes, these North Carolina corners are pretty good players. Now, does that mean you don't take those shots? Yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. And you still take them, but it can't be the focal point of what you do, which is what Notre Dame has had a tendency to do this season. You have to mix those up with, if you want to run a horizontal stretch, do it from a bunch, a wide bunch. Do it with post-snap switches. Do it with moving the pocket, get the quarterback out and do some different things that way. Execute but then mix it in with the horizontal or the vertical stretches. So if you want to take a shot outside, take your shot outside, right? Have Braden Lindsey run a go route, but instead of running it with a 4 verts concept, which you should do at times, run it out of a flood concept. So you've got your go route, but then if they kind of jump that, you've got your outs and those type of things.
Right.
And the thing, and if they're going to run verts and run a horizontal stretch, I'd like to see them do that out of more trip stuff, where you get your number 3 receiver kind of working back across the field. Then you can kind of mix up your backside routes. You can maybe bank some out cuts, really put that safety in a bind. If you like some of those one-on-ones, maybe bunch yourself a little bit, put Kevin Austin in a bit of a reduced alignment, which, is like 4 yards outside the tackle, because when you go, so if you're out wide, they're going to press a lot. But when you kind of bring a reduced look, they'll back off because they're thinking you're going to go across the field.
Right.
So then that allows you to kind of work on some vertical stuff where you can kind of occupy the safety and the corner. And then you can bring a Michael May. So bring him down, run like a deep corner route where he's going to occupy the corner and the safety, and then bring Michael Mayer on a 15, 20-yard drag route, replacing those two guys. Just some stuff like that where you're getting your horizontal stretches, but you're doing it in concepts where you're stressing a part of what North Carolina does. So you're really attacking their safeties, because if the pass game becomes a corner versus receiver game, North Carolina can win against Notre Dame. If it becomes your safeties are going to have to cover, that's advantage Notre Dame. And so that's really where it comes down to. So we need to see some creativity from Coach Reese. The quick game is going to be important, but North Carolina is going to be aggressive in their coverage. They're going to try to force you down the field. They're going to have to do some things formationally to try to isolate Michael Mayer, to get him in some favorable matchups. To me, this is a big game for Avery Davis.
Yeah.
Like, this has Avery Davis.
And he's been kind of quiet the last couple games.
Well, because teams have been kind of playing him.
They should. I mean,
right.
Yeah, right.
And so this screams Avery Davis breakout over the last few games to me. And it screams, okay, this is a game where if I'm Tommy Reese, I'm saying I'm gonna play Michael Mayer in about 7 different alignments in this game. And I'm gonna move them, and we're gonna have all types of things. We're gonna force them to be so afraid of Michael Mayer that they make the stupid mistake of leaving Braden Lindsey in a one-on-one on a post route, right?
Right.
That kind of thing. So it's gonna have to be creative. And if you can do that and move the pocket a little bit and not just have Jack Cohn always sitting right there, I think this is going to be a big passing game for Notre Dame. I think they can light the scoreboard up throwing the football.
Absolutely.
If there's some creativity, quick game is cool. RPOs have to be a big part of it, which is surprising, because a team that runs as many RPOs as North Carolina does, you'd think their defense would be prepared to handle it, but they're not. They do not defend RPOs very well. So it's kind of those games where I'm chomping at the bit as an offensive coordinator to say, man, if I can have some fun in this one.
Because they're not disciplined. I mean, that's really the biggest issue, is they're not disciplined. So you can be creative and you can do some fun things in the pass game, and you can kind of, light the fire of creativity with the guys too. You can be like, hey guys, look, man, we're going to have some fun this game. Like, let's do some of this and let's do some of that. And you still want to be true to who you are, but there's different things that you can do to kind of, keep things exciting. I think it'd be fun. And I think that if Tommy Reese has the ability to do it, I think you're right. I think this is an opportunity for him to be very creative and to have a great game plan, and a chance, another chance for Jack Cohn to cement himself as who he is with this team.
Yes.
Because I think that's important. Because, look, last game was good. He did kind of what I thought he was going to do, even though he had some mistakes. I mean, he was still over 70%. The passing yardage numbers weren't, help sexy, but that's okay because his completions were good. And
a couple drops that should have happened that would have helped that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think if he can do it a couple of games in a row, then I think the conversation, the narrative starts to switch a little bit. And I think
not
that's
just
important.
the external narrative, but internally. I think it creates even more buy-in from the players.
Yes.
I think another part of this pass game that I'm excited to see, Vince, is I'm really curious to see how Tommy Reese gets the running backs involved in the pass game. I think getting North Carolina in space as much as you can against non-corners is the way to go.
Yeah,
that's where I want to be in this game. I want to have as many matchups as I can against their safeties and linebackers. I am not making this are my outside receivers better than Tony Grimes and Kyler McMichael. Again, that doesn't mean that you don't take some shots against them. This isn't Patrick Surtain. You know what I mean?
Right.
It just means don't have your entire game plan built around beating those guys. So RPOs, moving the pocket, ISO stuff with your tight ends and your backs, then that opens up some of those outside opportunities. And then when you get a cover one, then you on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 2 or whatever, I'd prefer to see them on 2nd and shorts like they did last week. If you get into those situations, take your shot.
Right.
Take your shot. Be aggressive, but just
yeah,
make sure
because
you're staying on schedule.
I'm getting a little bit more confident that Notre Dame can pick up a 3rd and short with the run game. But you've also shown that you're not afraid to throw the ball on 3rd and short.
And
so
Tommy Rees's third down pass concepts have been money for 2 years.
Yeah, I agree.
The reason that they haven't been good on 3rd down this year is because they've had so many 3rd and longs. There's only so many things you can dial up on 3rd and long, especially when you have an offensive line that can't protect anybody more than a second and a half, 2 seconds.
Right. And I thought it was interesting where Brian Kelly actually said in the press conference, we needed to get away from run it on 1st down, run it on 2nd down, throw it on 3rd down.
Except they went right back to that in the 3rd quarter.
Right.
USC.
I know. But it's like, why would you think that would work consistently? You know what I mean? Like again, it's like beating your head against the wall over and over again. You think, this isn't going to hurt this time. Like, it's just,
yeah. So to me, Vince, those are things I see. Screen game, I think, can be real important because here's the thing: a team that's going to stunt and blitz as much as North Carolina does can be real susceptible to screens. And not just running outside breaking screens like we saw Saturday, but I'd like to see a couple of you. If you feel like here's what goes into scouting. I'm gonna give a little inside baseball to people. And we've got a little bit, kind of deep in today, but this one's gonna be another one. Talking about horizontal stretches and vertical stretch, all that. Here's another one. So when you're breaking down an opponent, you start to get a read on, okay, I have a good feeling on 2nd and 2 or, on 2nd and short or between, when we're backed up or when we're at this yard line or in this situation, they have a really heavy tendency to bring pressure and bring this kind of pressure. Part of breaking down your opponent is finding those tendencies and then exploiting those tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
There are times that North Carolina will get a little predictable with a field pressure. Okay, field pressure meaning it's coming from the strong side. There are times when they'll bring boundary pressures, but there are times when you can say, okay, I feel like I know in this situation the pressure is going to come. If Tommy Rees can figure that out and bring sort of an inside screen behind that, like an old school tunnel screen, something like that. If he can catch them in that, it's going to go. It's going to go. I think there's a screen or two in this game to be had for huge plays and not just running back screens. I think, I would love to see it with like a Chris Tyree. If he's back this game, I would love to see them. Yeah. Braden Lindsey, Styles, or Chris Tyree. Yep. I would love to see those guys kind of get a couple screens this game because if you can get those guys in space behind the blitz, because last week the screens were effective because USC was playing so passive. Right. You could kind of get the ball and then kind of get guys downfield to block. This week it's going to be the opposite. It's if you can catch them in one of those pressures, and that's talking about protecting the offensive line. Hey, let me beat you on a couple tunnel screens and a swing screen when you bring pressure because you think you can exploit our offensive line, and let's see how apt you are to bring pressure. Oh, so you still want to bring pressure, but you're just going to come up and play aggressively outside? Okay, cool. I'm going to do a quick pump fake, and then I'm throwing a wide fade to Braden Lindsey or Michael Mayer or Kevin Austin, right? It doesn't require me to block for 5 seconds. So you have some counters, but that's where that creativity from Tommy Rees needs to come into play. And I'm hoping that the last couple games have given him enough confidence in the offensive line to say, hey, look, they're not world beaters, but they are at least giving me the opportunity to do a little bit more. And so I'm going to have some fun this week. Yeah. And if he does that, this could be a game where the pass game really takes off. Advantage to me in this one, Vince, is advantage Notre Dame.
And it's if Notre Dame is creative, like you say, it's a huge advantage. If they just go out and do their thing like they did on Saturday, it's a slight advantage. That's kind of how I feel about it. I still think Notre Dame can be successful if they just, replicate and build on what they did on Saturday. And the key is build on. But if they can go out and do what you're talking about and be creative and kind of attack them in a different way, but still be up tempo and do those things, I think this advantage gets even bigger. So that's right. It's an advantage Notre Dame either way, but I think that advantage there's a sliding scale there of advantage for Notre Dame based on what they do.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to the final part of this matchup, Vince, and this is scoring offense against scoring defense. This is a bit of an interesting one. So Notre Dame has obviously not been a great scoring defense this year or offense this year, and
Right.
that number right there at the top is incorrect. This is incorrect. This is supposed to be 88th. They rank 88th in scoring offense, so that'll be corrected for the online version of this breakdown. But they rank 88th in scoring offense, and it's really not even that good because they have two defensive touchdowns and a special teams touchdown this year. So
yeah,
they're not. I don't even think they're averaging right now 30 points a game on offense. Notre Dame. So obviously, last week was a step in the right direction. But it's still a long way to go, and this is one of those games where you kind of have to be on your game as an offense. You have to be on point. You can't say, hey, we're going to win 30-27. You have to be willing to shut them down. You have to be willing to score, in my opinion, to make this one happen.
Yeah, and I like I said before about the offense, I do feel like they're headed in the right direction. I think that
I was wrong. They are 48th. I was looking at total offense. Yeah, they are 48th.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, I got my numbers a little mixed up. So what I was looking at,
right?
Well, I should not doubt myself. What I was looking at was what their numbers are. If you take the offensive away, they rank much lower. If you take the defensive and special teams touchdowns away,
of course,
they rank much lower. They're averaging 28 points a game purely on offense this season.
Right. And I feel like that number can only grow based on what they've been doing, based on what we saw on Saturday. And again, it's a small sample size. It's one game, but based on the things that Brian Kelly was saying after the game, okay, I feel like they're going to keep on with that. So that's that's the premise that I'm operating under, okay? I feel like they're a 35, 36 point a game type offense with the possibility of being more. And so they're pointing in the right direction here. And I feel like Notre Dame can score on this North Carolina defense. I do. Yeah. We talked about the rush defense, or the rush offense is trending in the right direction. I think the pass offense is trending in the right direction. The scoring offense is trending in the right direction. I was obviously not happy they didn't punch the Bauer interception into the end zone. That was disappointing when they were in the red zone. These red zone numbers aren't fantastic, right? They've literally been stopped 4 times in the red zone, which is not good. That puts them at 83rd in the country. That is just not good. And you'd like to see that touchdown percentage be higher, And so,
and it took a hit this weekend.
It did.
Now, part of that too is you got to take away. This is why I wish that the NCAA didn't do this, but I understand why they do. You have to consider, because it happens to other teams, but they did take a knee in the red zone at the end of a game.
They did,
but yeah, to your point,
that counts.
You have the first drive where Kevin Austin drops the ball at the 5-yard line.
Were they in the red zone at that point?
Oh yeah, they were in the red zone.
I couldn't remember where they snapped the ball.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he drops the ball. It was a crossing route. He dropped the ball at the 5-yard line. They were definitely in the red zone.
Okay.
And then they settle for a short field goal that gets missed. You get an interception return that gets the ball to the 4-yard line. You have to settle for a field goal. That's the whole point about the USC game is they left a lot of points on the field. If you can capitalize on that this week, you think about those 2 drives, Vince. You completely was 17-3 at halftime against USC, right? Should have got 7 on the first drive. That's correct. 24. You should have got a touchdown instead of a field goal. You're up 28-3. That third quarter looks a whole lot different against USC.
Absolutely.
17-3 is 2 possessions, and because USC got the ball, right? It's 2 possessions and one. You just got to make one defensive stop, and we can tie this thing up, right? If you're looking from a USC standpoint,
and that's what they said on the TV broadcast as they had the ball at the end of the first half. They're like, they can go down to score here. This is a ball game again.
Yep. So you've got to get 6 in this game, and when you look at North Carolina, their red zone defense has been statistically pretty good. Their red zone defense is statistically pretty good, but nothing special.
Right, exactly.
And if you look at it a little bit, it's been okay. Florida State was perfect, 3 for 3, 3 touchdowns, right? Georgia State doesn't have a very good offense. Virginia Tech doesn't have a very good offense. Georgia Tech's offense is not very good, especially at that time. And the funny thing is, Georgia Tech scored 45 points on North Carolina. They went 3 of 7 on touchdowns in the red zone in that game. 3 of 7. That game could have been a lot worse than it was. Notre Dame has to take advantage of that. They have to get 6. They have to do so early, and they have to protect the football. That's the other big thing.
Notre Dame used to be so good in the red zone. They used to be so good in the red zone getting touchdowns. And last 2 years, year and a half, they just haven't been as good at it. So that's just something that – and
even
I know
last year, that great offensive line, they weren't good. And last year's for the opposite reason. Here's the funny thing is, last year they would run the ball all the way down the field, get it in the red zone, and start
they try to get cute. Yeah.
This year they throw the ball all the way into the red zone and then try to run on first and second down. Right. And it's like, know who you are. You didn't know who you were last year. You don't know who you are this year.
Just ask us. We can tell you.
Figure it out. Yeah, figure it out. But I feel like North Carolina to me is a team that has been very vulnerable to giving up points against good teams.
Yeah.
Good offenses, not even great offenses, just good offenses. They're a team prone to giving up big plays. Notre Dame is going to have to rip off some big plays. They're going to have to get 6 in the red zone. They're going to have to protect the football. And I think if they're able to do those things, I think it's advantage of Notre Dame. I mean, you could argue that North Carolina has a little bit of an advantage here, but their yards per play number over here, which, is obviously ranks higher than Notre Dame's, but part of that is because they held Georgia State to 3.5. Georgia State stinks. To me, they gave up 7.1 against Florida State, 7.3 against Virginia, 4.8 against Virginia Tech, which is okay. 5-3 against Miami, who came into that matchup struggling big time. So to me, this is a game where you've got to start fast. You got to make big plays and be successful. And I'll push back on this a little bit. High correlation with O-line and red zone success. Not really.
Because last year they didn't have it.
Notre Dame had, in my opinion, the best offensive line in the country until Jarrett Patterson got hurt. Then they were top 5, and their red zone offense was not good last year. So no, and I'll just look it up so you have some. They were last year 84th in the country in red zone touchdown success, and they were 102nd in the country in overall red zone success last season, with one of the very best offensive lines in the country. Here's what it is, Richard, and where I think that you are, where I go with you is a good offensive line is certainly a key part of that, but you have to know who you are. You have to be able to execute. You have to have a plan that a really good red zone plan. And to me, Notre Dame has their red zone offense, especially from the 15 to the 20, is too similar to what they do at the 50 with the pass concepts. It's a lot of horizontal. I hate horizontal stretches in the red zone unless you're playing a team that's giving you cover 0. That's it, because then you can kind of pick your matchup. Sure. A lot of teams play zone in the red zone, and so to me, they haven't had necessarily the great game plans for it. And the other thing too is where Notre Dame was great under Chip Long is when they had a really mobile quarterback. That's what helped their red zone. I mean, Brandon Wimbush was a phenomenal red zone player, and they had a phenomenal red zone in 2017. They had a pretty good red zone attack in 2019, if I remember correctly. Notre Dame ranked 10th in the country that year in red zone effectiveness, and they didn't have exactly a great offensive line that season. But what they had is they had a great red zone pass package that made it very successful. A lot of fades to, Chase Claypool. They had really good stuff. And then you used Ian Book's running ability to your advantage to create opportunity. So they're going to have to make some of those changes, and I think they'll be fine. And then to me, advantage Notre Dame, Vince, I think you are there in that as well. Advantage Notre Dame. Correct?
Oh.
Just overall advantage Notre Dame.
I thought I was muted. I'm sorry. Yes, it's 100%.
You were muted.
Oh, you unmuted me. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely advantage Notre Dame. Yep. I like where they're trending right now. It's absolutely advantage Notre Dame.
Yeah. And then Matt Baisley with a super chat here as we wrap up. I came in late, so apologies if addressed already. Thoughts on the line for this game? -3.5 feels like a little disrespect. New UNC record misleading. We didn't talk about the line because we rarely talk about the lines unless it's something absurd. I don't think 3.5 is something I'm going to get necessarily upset about because of the way they've been doing lines with Notre Dame all season. I mean, they were a touchdown underdog to Wisconsin. I stopped paying it. I don't rarely pay attention to lines anyway.
Right.
I definitely stopped kind of paying attention when I saw that. So I would imagine it's going to grow a little bit as we get closer. But I think the thing about it is I still don't think people are believers in Notre Dame's offense. And 31 points against USC is not something that's going to make me a believer in Notre Dame's offense if I'm an outsider.
Nope.
And you're not going to win these games against North Carolina, USC, Virginia consistently if you're having to hold them to 16 points, because you're not going to do that every week. One of these teams is going to be able to score on you. Does Notre Dame have the offense to match that? So far this year, Notre Dame hasn't shown the ability to do that outside of the Florida State game, who's 3-4, 3-5. So I think that's probably part of it too. So it's appropriate to this matchup. This is the game where the Notre Dame offense has to show, hey, we've figured it out, we've arrived, and we're going to light this team up. And if they can light this team up, then I think you're going to see future spreads reflect that. But right now, in defense of the odds makers, you've got a team that can score going against a defense that has their best All-American player not playing against an offense that hasn't shown the ability to light the scoreboard up.
Right.
I understand, as if I'm looking at this as someone who doesn't cover Notre Dame every single day, I actually somewhat understand that spread. And you know,
I didn't take into account the Kyle Hamilton factor, and I'm not saying that he's the difference in like a 4 or 5 points or whatever, but
he could. I mean, it could be a 10-point win turns into a 3-point win,
right?
Because you get one more touchdown,
right? That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Scary.
So anyway, so that's it for today's show. We're going to be back tomorrow at 12:30 for the breakdown of the Notre Dame defense against the North Carolina offense. That's going to be a fun show because North Carolina has a very good offense.
Yes,
and when they're on, they are dangerous, and they've been a lot more inconsistent than last year. But they're still dangerous. They're still dangerous. So I look forward to breaking that one down. Matt says, well, I'm still betting on this one. Matt, since you joined late, I would encourage you to listen to the entire show. And I think if you listen to the entire show, you'll realize that we aren't going to push back on that, right? I'm just trying to explain to you why I think the line is what it is.
I still like Notre Dame more than 3.5 as well.
Right,
but
still,
I
understand the line. I do. And I expect that to grow as we get closer. But we'll have that breakdown, of course, predictions and analysis on Thursday. We'll have our Friday mailbag. Please sign up for Irish Breakdown. I took that banner down. It hasn't been up during the show for today. But obviously check out boards.irishbreakdown.com. Check that out. Got a lot going on. We have a ton of people sign up the last few days. Got some recruiting notes on there. We're going to have some breakdowns on there this week. It's been a lot of great conversation going on there. So make sure you join that part of our community. We appreciate everybody that has already signed up and appreciate everybody that's part of the show today. So that's going to be it. Give us a like, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Be ready to check with us tomorrow. And Matt Baisley says, I'll commit 10% of my winnings to IB. So, hey, get out a second mortgage, sell your car, put it all on there, and if you win, you give us 10%. Obviously, I'm joking. Do not do any of that.
No.
At all. But yeah, we appreciate you, Matt, and we'll hopefully see you tomorrow. We'll see all of you tomorrow. Vince, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and check out irishbreakdown.com. Talk to you soon.